I'm Yash.
And I'm Emily.
And our topic is Japan deflation. So the question that we're trying to answer today is why were inflation rates so low in Japan during the early 2000s? And then we'll answer with how did the government respond?
So, some background onto why Japan had such a high deflation. In the 1980s, after World War II, Japan actually was producing the largest gross national product worldwide. And because their economy was booming so high, there was lots of speculation, which resulted in low interest rates. And so many of the properties and values of the items had extremely high valuations. And to try to fix this crisis, the Bank of Japan raised interest rates, but this only resulted in a stock market crash and a debt crisis. And so many factors contributed to this crisis of Japan deflation. Um, the slow Bank of Japan response was one of them, as the lag time between implemented policies did not reach the economy as soon as it would like to. The aging population demographic of Japan also contributed to this, because when the crisis hit, citizens tended to save more and spend less, which only exacerbated the problem even more. And this period was between the 1990s to the 2000s and is commonly referred to as the lost decade.
So during the lost decade, Japan was in a recession. That indicates at least 2 quarters of economic downturn. This led to the GDP decreasing for 10 years. As you can see on the business cycle graph, the inflationary period is much shorter compared to the recessionary period. During this time, the GDP decreases. As the Fed works to increase the monetary supply, the Japanese economy returned back to equilibrium, resulting in the beginning of an increase in GDP.
So, aggregate supply is affected by two factors: changes in resource prices and worker productivity. During the recession in Japan in the 1990s, there was a higher rate of unemployment, which meant that there was a lower amount of productivity in the labor force. Thus, aggregate supply would decrease. And on the graph, you can see this as the aggregate supply curve shifts to the left, resulting in a lower real GDP value and higher price values.
A PPC graph shows the amount of two different goods that can be produced utilizing a limited amount of resources. The points on the curve are where production is at its maximum capability. The two resources compared on the graph below are capital goods and consumer goods. The point describing the Japanese economy during the last decade is inside the curve, indicating that resources are not fully utilized. Since Japan was in a recession, the unemployment rate was really high, so labor was the resource that was underutilized. During the last decade, less investors were willing to invest in the economy, so less business investments occurred. This not only decreased real GDP, because the I of CIGX refers to business investments, but it also increased interest rates, because investments and the real interest rate has an inverse relationship. As business investments decrease, the real interest rate increases, and vice versa. This also shifts aggregate demand to the left.
So, Japan's government initially attempted to use fiscal policy to address the deflation problem that was rampaging across the nation. They did so by increasing government spending and lowering taxes. However, There was a variety of reasons why this was ineffective for Japan. When the government spent money on inefficient public work projects, it did little to help restore the economy. There was also a lag between the time the policies were implemented and any change was seen by the public. Because the money was not allocated efficiently, money of the government spending was wasted. As a result, we learned that ultimately the consumers have control of the market and they should tell us where the money should be spent and invested in. So, to address the decade-long recession and deflation Japan was stuck in, the federal government switched to monetary policies by using open market operations to help restore the economy. The central bank, which is the Bank of Japan, bought bonds from businesses in exchange for cash. Thus, by injecting the money supply with cash, the money supply would increase and economic growth would rise. These monetary policy actions taken by the federal bank helped to control the deflation that Japan was experiencing. And you can see this on the graph as the money supply shifts to the right and the quantity of money would increase and the real interest rate would decrease. And so ultimately, Japan, in this case, monetary policies worked better than fiscal policies. And Japan only learned this after trying fiscal policies, and as it only worsened the deflation that they were experiencing, they had to resort to open market operations. And so this is our works cited page. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.